Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'm a consultation specialist with SNC Lavalin. Today, we are continuing our series of live stream topics as our project moves through consultation round 2 of the environmental assessment phase. The topics we are covering parallel our project activities, so we hope these will help our viewers and listeners better understand the project and provide input along the way. So let's get started. Today we're going to talk about the proposed construction camps to help community members understand the thinking behind and activities associated with the process of identifying potential locations for the construction camps. So as we normally do, we're going to provide a bit of a project background for those who are new to the project. Then we'll move on and do a review of the alternatives assessment process, talk about construction camps, the potential construction camps, and how the process of identifying and screening out between construction camp alternatives, and then talk about how you can contact us. So let's start with the project location. Webequie First Nation is located about 250 kilometers from both Hudson Bay and James Bay. And it sits on an island as well. It is generally speaking within northwestern Ontario. And in terms of the purposes for the Webequie Supply Road, I'll just go through them here. The first is to move materials, supplies, and people from the Webequie Airport to the McFalds Lake area, which sits within the Ring of Fire mineral deposit area. Um, the second purpose for the Webequie Supply Road is to provide employment and economic development opportunities to Webequie community members while allowing them to both preserve and enhance their language and culture. And then finally, to provide experience and training opportunities for youth to help encourage the pursuit of additional skills through post-secondary or post-high school education. Let's now talk a little bit about the project itself. And as I always say, it's more than just a two-lane gravel road. So the road itself, the planned road is approximately 107 kilometers in length. It would extend from, as I mentioned, Webequie Airport southeast to the McFalds Lake area in the Ring of Fire um, uh, mineral deposit area. Of those 107 kilometers that the road would travel, 17 sit within the Webequie First Nation reserve lands. Excuse me, and we also are working with a planning corridor or preliminary, what we call a preliminary preferred corridor. That's 2 kilometers in width. And so we work with that corridor and we're now looking at route alternatives within that sort of planning area, that preliminary preferred corridor. And then finally, the final corridor width is planned to be 35 meters. That would be the right of way, the cleared area, and the road itself would be a two-lane gravel surface road. Continuing with the project description, there are three major water body crossings. When I talk about water bodies, I talk about lakes or rivers or streams. There are many other water body crossings, 23 actually, but the three major ones require bridges. The other ones would require different types of culverts. Um, Again, as I mentioned, it's more than just a two-lane gravel road. The project would include both temporary and permanent aggregate pit and rock quarry areas, that would have equipment for processing or crushing the rock into various sizes depending on the purposes for construction. And then, of course, there would be need to be access roads to get to these pit and rock quarry areas, and these access roads would have crossings of water crossings as well included with them. So there is a lot of infrastructure beyond just the two-lane gravel road. In terms of construction camps, these would be temporary, and the purpose is to accommodate construction crews and also uh, perhaps provide permanent locations for operations and maintenance yards. Um, and of course, these kinds of facilities would have supportive facilities such as wastewater treatment plants and drinking water storage areas as well too. And then finally, these construction camps or the project would include what we call storage and laydown yards, temporary storage and laydown yards for equipment and materials. And typically these are, as I'll get into a little bit later on, these are typically part of the construction camps. Because the workers are there, they can get their equipment and their materials needed for the day without having to travel too far. So as we move along, we're going to talk a little bit now and review the alternatives assessment process. So for every undertaking or project, a quote reasonable range of alternatives must be considered during an environmental assessment. So these alternatives include alternatives to and alternative methods. When we talk about alternatives to the proposed undertaking, these are what you call functionally different ways of approaching and dealing with a problem or opportunity. When we look at alternative methods of carrying out the proposed undertaking, these are different ways of doing the same activity. So let's look at some examples to help explain this a little bit further. When we talk about alternatives to a proposed undertaking, again, these are functionally different ways of approaching and dealing with a problem or opportunity. So in the case of an all-season road, you could have different modes of transport proposed, such as a cargo hovercraft or cargo airship or railway as well. You could also upgrade if there were an existing trail system along this route. You could upgrade it to a seasonal winter road and perhaps use that to help move goods along this route. Of course, you could do nothing. You could maintain what they call the status quo. You could manage traffic demand so that there may not be a pressing need for an all-season road anymore. Or, as Webequie First Nation has chosen, you could propose a new all-season road. Now let's talk a little bit about alternative methods. Alternative methods of carrying out a proposed undertaking, again, are different ways of doing the same activity. So when we're talking about an all-season road, these could be different routes. Remember, I talked a little bit earlier about a preferred corridor having been identified that's 2 kilometers wide. And having that sort of planning area allows us to move the position of the road, so to adjust the route to avoid any constraints that we maybe don't know about right now and that may be brought up as the process continues. So now let's get into the construction camps and talk about that process. So a construction camp is may include accommodations like a bunkhouse for workers, construction offices, kitchen and dining hall, first aid station, communication system, wastewater treatment system, groundwater supply wells, um, waste handling and storage facility areas, electricity supply from diesel generators to provide electricity to the camp itself, above ground fuel storage tanks and refueling areas, lay down storage areas for equipment and materials as well, as I mentioned earlier. So there's a lot to these there's a lot to these camps. They're not. There's a lot of different infrastructure components associated with them, and I wanted to actually also mention that um, there will not just be one construction camp along this route. In fact, the construction planners have identified four camps being required to allow for worker safety and allow for the project to be built efficiently. So two of these camps will be in the north-south section of the road with two in the east-west section. And this next slide will show you the potential camp locations. You can see we have, camp 1A and 1B, 2A and 2B, 3A and 3B, and 4A and 4B. So eventually, between the two options for camps 1, 2, 3, and 4, one is going to be chosen. And the idea being that these would be distributed along the route to again help construction be undertaken in an efficient way. If we move to the next slide, this may look complicated, but it actually isn't. So what we do is we do an evaluation of each camp location. And when we do that, we look at multiple factors, and these factors are factors that have been identified by community members, the general public, technical staff as well too. They're called valued components. These valued components are grouped together into categories. So you can see the categories represented by different colors on your screen: living environment, physical environment, indigenous land use and interest, socioeconomic environment, technical considerations as well too. So you see these bars and you see the scores. So the scores are on the left-hand axis there. So the bigger, the longer the bar is, the higher it goes, the more of an impact it has. So the lower the score, the less impact a particular camp location has. And the different colors that you see on that same graph for each bar shows how much each factor contributes. So, for example, if we were to look at Camp 2B, the blue and the orange, which are the technical considerations and I believe physical environment, almost contribute equally to that score, or that very high score for Camp 2B. So that hopefully that gets you an idea, gives you an idea. So we do a very detailed analysis, and if we move to the next slide and look at camp locations 1A and 1B, and just to remind you, locations 1A and 1B are the ones closest to the actual Webequie community settlement on the island. And if you look at the different colors on the land base, the colors represent levels of sensitivity or scores, and the higher the score is greater impact, more sensitive, and the lower the score. So the preference is to put the camps, these potential camp locations, on areas with lower scores, because that is the same as having less impact. So you're looking at the two options close to the community. If we move to the next slide, we'll look at potential camp locations 2A and 2B. And you can see the choice that we have there. So obviously with blue being less sensitive areas and good, as you can see on the legend on this map, it is a preferred location over the area that sits over the orange as well. So that just gives you an idea. So we go through this analysis just like we do for the different road routes as well. We do the same thing for every other piece of what you call ancillary or additional infrastructure required as part of the road. Pits and quarries, we do the same thing. So we do it for pits and quarries, we do it for construction camp locations as well. And if we move to the next slide, this is 3A and 3B, so you're now moving into the east-west section of the route, and we have two locations here. The one location on the right was considered to be inappropriate because the score was higher, because it sat on more sensitive areas. And then finally, camp locations 4A and 4B, right near the end of the project, just west of the, looks like, yes, just west of the Mukatai River. Yeah, there's two locations, one that was on the east side of the Mukatai River, which was considered to be too sensitive. And so the one on the west side was considered to be more appropriate. So we go through it's quite an involved process to get to that point to be able to have the information, but the good thing is it's a very thorough process that represents what community members and the general public are concerned about in terms of potential important things to them. So it takes that and allows us to really give a sort of a transparent, like a clear evaluation that we can trace back and show community members as well. So um, there's a lot of work put into trying to figure out where the best place to put these different kinds of facilities, these construction camps. So if we move to the next slide, we are almost done today's presentation. Uh, I just wanted to say that we would love to visit your community. Um, we things have been opening up for the last few months post COVID, and we would love to come up and visit and talk to you about this project, get your feedback about this project, and really have that open conversation. We are also in the process of doing virtual community meetings right now, presenting some of the same material, and we encourage you to join those as well if you're not able to arrange an in-person presentation. But we would love to visit your community. So that wraps up today's discussion of proposed construction camps. We hope it was helpful and encourages you to join us again in 2 weeks. Don't forget to keep in touch with our project team members via the contact information available on our website, supplyroad.ca. There's a lot of information there. Miigwech, and we will talk to you again in 2 weeks when we continue our discussion of topics related to the Webequie Supply Road project. Miigwech, see you soon.